Hey guys, welcome to my tower tutorial. I've been wanting to create this tutorial for quite some time now. The documentation is pretty sparse and there's not a whole lot of information out there for those of you who have never touched the software or have never created missions to fly your solo. So I wanted to share some of my experience and go over some of the basic features in Tower, and we'll actually cover some of the more advanced topics as well. But the main thing is I want you to not be afraid of Tower. I've tested it multiple times, and as long as you follow a few simple guidelines, you'll never have a problem. You just have to make sure that you pay close attention to your surroundings, your altitude, and basically just understand what everything does. So I'm going to jump into some of the more basic features first, and then as we move forward in this tutorial, I'll talk about some of the more advanced functions. So let's just jump right in. Here we're in the edit window. I'm using a satellite map. I'll talk about how to set up your offline maps and selecting a mapping provider a little bit later because that's a little bit more of an advanced feature. But right now we're in the editor window, and you can get to the editor window by selecting the menu over on the top left. There's a little drop down menu, and you want to just select editor. And we'll spend most of our time here in the editor window. So let's talk about some of the icons we see on top. The first one is for laying down single waypoints. Okay, if you have that highlighted, you basically touch the map and it'll create a sequence of waypoints that the solo would follow, starting from waypoint 1 all the way to waypoint 5 in this case. Okay, the button to the right of that allows you to draw curves. So let's say I wanted to continue along. I'll draw a big curve here. And you see that the software automatically fills in the waypoints for the curve that I drew. So that's kind of handy if you wanted to draw a path around a structure to do some of the more advanced waypoints like region of interest. That comes in handy, and it's a time saver, so you don't have to lay out just one point at a time. You can just simply draw the path that you want it to take. The next button is a select button. And if we click that, you can see you can select all the waypoints by touching the word select all over to the right hand side. And you see all of the waypoints now are highlighted. And once you have waypoints selected, you can actually change some of the attributes. So let's say I wanted to change the altitude of all of these waypoints to 100 feet, because right now you can see they're all set to 66 feet. So by using the select button, all of them are selected now. And in order to get to the property screen, you click the fourth circle button on the left hand side, and that opens up the properties pane for the waypoints. So I'm going to change that to 100 feet. And you see all the waypoints now are set to 100 feet. So that's something you can use to, when you want to adjust multiple waypoints. Okay. Next to that, we have the garbage can button or the delete button. There's a couple of different ways to use this. You can simply clear the entire mission, or you can clear selected waypoints. So in this case, I have all of my waypoints already selected. So if I hit clear mission, it'll clear the entire mission. You can also, I'm going to lay down a few more waypoints. Let's say I want to select waypoints 2 and 3. Let's say I had those selected for some reason. Now I hit the garbage can. I can simply hit clear selected, and waypoints 2 and 3 will disappear, and that'll leave me with just 2 waypoints. Okay, so that's the delete button. And then to the right of that, obviously, is the undo button, which allows you to undo what you just did. And there's multiple levels of undo as well. So you can just keep clicking that to go back. Okay, so that's the general interface. So I'm going to clear the mission, and I'm going to put together a simple single waypoint mission. Okay, and we're going to talk about this mission as it is. Now, when you play with Tower, there's a couple different ways to go about it. You can set up a fully autonomous flight, or you could set up a flight where it would be required for you to control the landing and the takeoff. Okay, this mission you see here on the screen is just a simple fly from waypoint 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, and there's no takeoff and there's no landing involved. Okay, so how would you set yourself up to control this mission? Let's say you wanted to be involved in controlling Solo as part of the mission. So let's say you wanted to be responsible for the takeoff and the landing. What would that workflow look like? Well, what you would do, let me pull up my my pen tool here. Come on. Let's say that your home location was here. So let's say you powered up Solo there. That's where you attained your GPS lock and it was safe to fly. Okay? In this mission, let's say you wanted to take off. Okay? So let's say you take off manually at this X. You would bring Solo up to a safe distance, or a safe height rather, and you would enable the mission. You would upload it to Solo and put it into autonomous mode, and then Solo would fly from your home position to waypoint 1, then the 2, then the 3, and then the 4. Disregard that 5th waypoint. I didn't mean to add it. But in this case, it would fly 1, 2, 3, 4, and it would hover in the air once it got to waypoint 4 at an altitude of whatever waypoint 4 is set to. In this case, it's 66 feet. So at that point, you would be responsible for landing it manually or hitting the return home on your controller, and Solo would land at the X, right, where you initially powered up and obtained your satellite lock from. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to actually include a takeoff and a landing. So let's highlight waypoint 1. Let's just change that to a takeoff waypoint. Okay? Now you'll notice something weird happened. Let me zoom out here. Waypoint 1 disappeared. Okay? Why did it disappear? Well, it disappeared to confuse you, first and foremost. But actually, there's a good reason why it disappeared. Because waypoint 1 doesn't exist anymore. You're telling Solo to take off, but that's really not it's not a point on the map, right, that you can pre-specify. The only place that you can take off from is where you power up Solo and where it obtains its satellite lock from. So from a mapping perspective, we don't know where that is. That's up to you. So let's say you took off, or you powered up Solo here, again with the green X. That would be your takeoff point. So wherever you power up Solo, it's going to take off at that point, and it's going to rise to the height that you set here in this box. So let's say 13 feet. So as is, you would power on Solo. When you launch this mission, it would take off. It would hover up to 13 feet, and then it would continue to waypoint 2, and then the 3, and then the 4. And once it got to waypoint 4, we haven't told it to land yet, it would hover there. So let's change waypoint 4 to be a landing waypoint. Okay? A landing waypoint, unlike a takeoff waypoint, is an actual point on the map, because you're telling Solo exactly where to land. So there's a definite latitude and longitude coordinate for where that's going to occur. So that's visually represented there with the little triangle. So that makes perfect sense. You're going to tell Solo where to land, and at the end of this mission, it's going to go to waypoint 4, it's going to descend, and it's going to land automatically. Now let's say you wanted to return home instead of land. You could select return to launch. Okay, now the map is looking really funny, right? There's only 2 waypoints. You're probably thinking, what's going on here? Well, your return to launch is similar to your home or your takeoff waypoint. That can't be visually represented because it's going to return to where you powered up solo. So there's no icon associated with that. It wouldn't make sense for there to be an icon that says, this is my return to launch location, because we haven't launched yet, right? And we're creating this mission before even powering solo on. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a waypoint that, Tower doesn't know about yet. So this is a totally valid mission, right? It may not look like much, but let me take out the old pen tool again. So let's assume that our home location is here, and we enable autonomous flight on solo. It's going to rise to 13 feet in the air. It's going to head to waypoint 2. It's going to head to waypoint 3. At waypoint 3, it's going to receive a return to launch, because that's what we programmed. And it's actually going to come back home and land, just like a normal return to home that you would issue, via the controller. So that would be considered a fully autonomous mission in Tower. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you understand why the takeoff and the return to home options aren't explicitly shown on the map, because they're dependent upon where your solo is powering up and obtaining its satellite lock from. Okay, let me clear the map. Okay, so let's talk about some other things here. Let me clear the mission. Yes. Let me talk about some of the other types of waypoints. Region of interest. Let's talk about that. Let's say you wanted to have solo look at a region or focus on a region on the map. Let's assume that this center point here is the region you wanted to focus on. Okay? If we look at the properties of waypoint, of this region of interest waypoint, by selecting it on the bottom, you can see there's an altitude setting. Now, this altitude setting is not the altitude that solo will fly. Okay, so keep that in mind. What this is how far off the ground should solo point its gimbal and its camera. Okay, so this is assuming you have a gimbal installed, and you want to set the height on this to be, appropriate to the structure that you want to, keep center in your frame. So if this structure was, I don't know, 100 feet tall, you might select, 50 feet or even less. Depending on how far away solo is from the structure, it may have the entire thing in frame, or if you're pretty close to the object, setting your altitude will change how much of the structure is actually in view, right? So that's what the altitude does. So you could set that at an appropriate altitude, and then solo, once it's flying in the vicinity of that structure, will point the gimbal, and it'll always maintain that object in its viewfinder. Okay, so how do we use it? It's recommended to set this region of interest as soon as possible. So it's advisable to set it on a simple mission as your first waypoint. I'm actually pressing and holding on it, and I'm moving it around the screen here. So I'm going to center it more directly on the subject. So now that we have the region of interest set up, we can select the normal waypoint button, change it to type of Waypoint, and let's draw a normal mission like we would. So I'm going to select, first waypoint is here, and I guess just so it's smooth, I'm going to draw a path around this structure. Okay, so because we selected, or because we placed the region of interest first, as soon as Solo launches, it's going to immediately face in the direction of that structure. Okay, irregardless of the direction that Solo's traveling, it's going to be facing that structure, and it'll continue flying and always maintain focus on whatever your region of interest is. And because we selected that as the first waypoint, it'll always be pointing at that structure. So in this case, Solo would take this flight, and it would be pointing towards the middle of the screen here the whole time until it completes the mission. Okay, so that's how you would use your region of interest. One thing to keep in mind, I'm going to clear the screen. You can select region of interest at any time. So let's say I have a few waypoints. Okay, and now for my fifth waypoint, I want to select region of interest, and I put it down here. Okay, and then I continue placing waypoints by selecting waypoint and continue building the mission. Okay, in this scenario, because our region of interest is at waypoint 5, right, Solo won't start looking at this structure until it gets here. All right, and that may not be the best solution, right? So you definitely want to set your region of interest as appropriate to what you want to accomplish. And like I said, it's probably best to select your region of interest as your first waypoint, so Solo is always looking in that direction, and it'll always lock on that position. So if you did it this way, the video footage won't look as smooth because Solo's just going to be looking in the direction of your waypoints here, and then when it gets to 4, there's going to be an abrupt turn of the camera or the gimbal, or actually the Solo, and it's going to be pointing towards that structure for the remaining waypoints. And that's not the most, visually appealing way to set up this region of interest. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's talk about another waypoint method, which is called circle. So again, in the editor window, we want to select the waypoint button. Then from the drop down, select circle. Okay, now place the first waypoint over the spot that you want to circle. In this case, we'll select this mausoleum or whatever it is here in the cemetery. You can reposition the center by holding down the waypoint and moving it on the screen. Okay, now to change the properties and the radius, tap on the bottom representation of the waypoint. Okay, now you can set your altitude, your circle radius, and the number of turns. Okay, unlike region of interest, the altitude specified here is your actual flight altitude. Okay, so you want to have this to be, you want to set this to be whatever's appropriate. Let's say 100 feet. Now the circle radius, you can make this as large or small as you want. Obviously, you want to make it big enough to be able to capture the subject in your frame while you're filming. And number of turns will tell Solo how many times to circle the object. And by default, it's set to 1. So we'll leave it on 1. Okay. And just to see how other waypoints are displayed, if you add anything other than a circle waypoint, you'll see that once Solo does its circle around the object, it shows the path it's going to take to leave the circle. In this case, it's over here. So the second waypoint after the circle will be here at waypoint 2, and it'll go all the way around. Okay? You can also obviously set your circle to be later on in the flight. So you could do something like this. Have 3 normal waypoints defined, and then your 4th waypoint be a circle. So you could say, select circle from this drop-down box, place it on the object or your focus, and then highlight that waypoint and change, your altitude settings, your circle radius, your number of turns, whatever. I'll do 2 turns this time. So it's going to do 2 turns around the structure, and then we can add some continuing waypoints for Solo to take back home. So that, in a nutshell, is how circle works. Circle is kind of like your orbit waypoint, or your orbit smart shot that you can kick off in the Solo app. So that's pretty much the same thing here in Tower. Okay? When you're defining your waypoints, actually I want to change that to a normal waypoint, but let me undo it. Okay, it's a normal waypoint. When you're about to create a series of waypoints, you can select the first waypoint and change the altitude. In this case, I'm going to just arbitrarily select 100 feet. Okay? When you do that, if you create multiple waypoints after that, or subsequent waypoints, you'll notice that Tower sets them to the same altitude as the previous waypoint, which is handy, because you don't want to set each waypoint individually. So by default, that's the normal behavior. Waypoint 2 will always have the same altitude as the waypoint prior. Okay? So keep that in mind. You'll want to set your altitude right off the bat on waypoint 1, if that's the type of mission you're creating. Obviously, each waypoint doesn't have to be the same altitude. You can select waypoint 4 and change that to 70 feet. So let's talk about what would happen in that case. At waypoint 3, which is set to 100 feet, Solo would be expected to be at that height when it hits waypoint 3. Okay? Now waypoint 4 is 70 feet. So Solo will start descending once it hits waypoint 3, and it'll descend down to 70 feet by the time it reaches waypoint 4. And then the same thing to waypoint 5. It'll increase in altitude and reach 100 feet right about the time it hits waypoint 5. Okay, so it'll do this smooth up and down motion depending on the height of your waypoints. Another option within the waypoint is a delay. So you can have Solo wait an arbitrary amount of time, looks like up to a minute, at each waypoint until it continues on to the next waypoint. So once Solo reaches waypoint 5, it's going to sit there for 60 seconds until it heads off into waypoint 6. Okay, so that might be useful if you wanted to take pictures or something like that when it's sitting at a certain waypoint. You could go back to your flight screen in Tower and click the video preview and hit the shutter button and take some pictures, or rotate the camera or something like that. So you have the option of selecting a delay or setting a delay at each waypoint if you needed them. So let's see. There's other types of waypoints. There's a change speed waypoint. Okay, and you'll notice it's not an actual waypoint. It's a speed change. So when Solo reaches waypoint 5, it's going to change its speed to whatever you define here. And I believe, if depending on the units you have set in your preferences, if they're metric or imperial, they'll correspond to either miles per hour or meters, might be meters per second or something like that. I'm pretty sure if you're using imperial or metric, no, imperial, sorry. If you're using United States measurements, this is in miles per hour. So you could set the speed here, let's say 30 miles per hour, which is a little bit more than half the speed of Solo's capable of. You could set this to 30 miles per hour. So at waypoint 5, Solo will change speed and haul ass and continue on for the entire remainder of the mission at that speed. Okay, so that's the thing to remember. It'll set the speed to 70 miles an hour, or whatever, not 70, 30 miles per hour, as defined here. And after waypoint 5, it's going to maintain that speed for the remainder of the mission. Unless you select another waypoint and change it to another speed change and slow it down or speed it up, whatever. So I changed waypoint 9 to be 18 miles per hour. So Solo would accelerate once it reached waypoint 5 until it hit waypoint 8, at which point it would slow down and continue the mission at that speed. Okay, so the important thing to remember is speed defines the speed that Solo is going to travel for the remainder of the waypoints following that instruction, unless there's another speed change that you place in the mission. Okay? Okay, so let's talk about some of the more advanced features. Let's say you wanted to fly a fully autonomous mission, which can be done, right? We showed one earlier. It was pretty simple. It was a couple waypoints with a takeoff and a landing. But let's say you wanted to perform a mission where Solo would be outside of the range of your controller. Okay, either be it by, outside of the distance, or it may be behind a structure or a building or something where it would lose controller signal because of whatever reason. By default, out of the box, Solo will return home if it ever loses signal to the controller. That's a failsafe that's built in, right? And 9 times out of 10, you want that to happen. But because we have the ability to tell Solo, hey, continue on with the mission, forget about the controller status, we can tell Solo that if you lose communication with the controller, behave in a different way. You can tell it to return to land, you can tell it to continue on with the mission, or you could tell it to just land, right? And that's going to be dependent upon a parameter that you select and modify and then upload to Solo. So Solo has a list of hundreds of parameters which control, many different things that are hard-coded and tell Solo how to fly and how to react to certain things. And this is a very advanced feature, and you shouldn't really mess with this unless you fully understand what these parameters do. So I'm going to talk about the parameter that we need to change in case you were interested in programming a long-distance mission where it would be guaranteed that Solo would lose connectivity to the controller, and you would prefer Solo to finish the mission as opposed to returning home. Okay, so there's a way to disable that failsafe, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. I'm going to connect to my Solo, and I'll go through how to change that parameter and upload it and save it to the drone. Okay, so before we do that, I want to explain how to upload a mission to Solo and how to kick off a mission before we get into some of the more advanced stuff. So I'm going to connect to my Solo Wi-Fi now by going into the settings screen. Let me do that off camera. Okay, I'm connected to my Solo Wi-Fi now. Now you want to connect to Solo by clicking on the top right hand button, the three little dots, and select connect. Okay, now I'm connected. If I go to the flight data screen, you can see the different values on the top. You can see your voltage, your battery voltage, the mode that Solo is in, controller signal, height, your satellite, all that stuff. So for our purposes, I want to show you how to create and upload a mission to Solo. I'm just going to go back to the editor screen really quick. I'm just going to populate the mission with some waypoints. Okay. Now you select the top right hand button and you're going to select upload mission. Now it's going to ask you if you want to add a takeoff and a return to land to your mission. Now this is up to you. We discussed this earlier. If you want a fully autonomous flight, you can say yes to this, and it will insert a takeoff and it'll insert a return to land command into your mission. So it would put the takeoff as the first thing it does, and then a return to land right after your last waypoint, kind of like we did earlier. Assuming you've already done that, you can say skip the step, or if you planned on, bringing Solo up into the air manually first and landing it manually, you can select skip as well. So I'm just going to select skip for now. Okay, it says waypoint sent. And Solo at some point should give an audible alert saying that it was saved to the drone. I may have the volume down on my tablet, so it probably announced it, but it didn't. We didn't hear it. But nonetheless, that will happen as well. It'll say waypoint saved to drone. Now, this is the way you would actually tell Solo to start flying the mission, and this is how. Well, this is the piece that's missing from a lot of videos. So this is how it's done. Once you've uploaded the mission, you want to go back to your flight data screen by selecting the top left menu again. Okay, here we are. Now, you'll notice on the bottom, there's an arm button. Arm is the equivalent of pressing the fly button on your controller. Okay, now, if you did that from the controller already, and in this scenario, you would be expected to have Solo already up in the air before you execute this mission, because we have not included a takeoff waypoint. Okay, so let's assume Solo's flying in the air. It's already armed at that point, in which case you would not see that arm button on the bottom anymore. Solo is up in the air, and it's ready to be told to enter what's called autonomous mode. And the way you do that is, you see on the top where it says loiter, that's actually a drop-down menu. So if you select that, what you want to do is scroll through and select auto, which means autonomous. And once you do that, Solo will immediately fly to the first waypoint that you have defined in your mission. And since I'm testing this in my basement, Solo's not going anywhere because it doesn't have GPS lock, it's not armed, and doesn't have propellers installed. So another thing you'll notice is, if you're actually out in the field doing this for real and you have satellite lock, the buttons on the bottom of the screen change. There's a couple different options which I can't show you right now. So just be mindful that the screen may not look 100% like my screen. So you want to make sure that you've obtained your satellite lock, you've launched Solo, and you're up in the air, and there's nothing between where Solo is and the first waypoint, because it's going to make a beeline to that first waypoint, and you'll be pretty sad if there was a tree in between you and that waypoint. Okay, so that's the way you would tell Solo to actually take off. Now, once Solo completes its mission, let's say this is the mission you decided to run, or something like that. When Solo reaches waypoint 6, it's going to hover, and at that point, what you want to do is hit return home on your controller, and Solo will land right where you took off from, assuming you had a solid GPS lock, with an HDOP, of less than 2, and it would be pretty accurate, and it would land pretty much exactly where it took off from. Okay, so that's how you get Solo up in the air, and that's how you get it to run an autonomous mission. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the flight editor screen again. And I'm going to clear this mission. I'm going to delete everything. And I want to talk about what happens to the mission once you send it to Solo. Once you send a mission to Solo, it stays on the Solo forever until you overwrite it with something. So you have to be careful that you don't execute or put Solo into autonomous mode without being damn sure what mission it has on board. Okay? So to see what mission Solo currently has, once you're connected to Solo, you can click the top right-hand button and say download mission. Okay? And you see the mission it has is the one we just drew out a little bit ago. All right? So let's say you deleted or cleared this mission, and you said, well, I want to do this instead, right? And you created a different mission, and then you weren't thinking, and you went to the flight data screen, and you put Solo into auto mode like we did earlier. Well, it would execute the mission it already has, because you forgot to upload it via the editor window. So let's go back to the editor window. You would have to select the top right-hand button and select upload mission. And, this way you know which mission you're actually flying. So let's show what happens when you say yes to this dialog. Where do you want to append a takeoff and a return to land to your mission? Let's say okay. All right. It does that, and it also uploads it at the same time. So if you look here, our first waypoint is a takeoff. Now it's going to rise to 66 feet, and it's going to be the default. Okay, so you have to be mindful that if you select yes to that dialog box, you want to go back and check your altitudes. Okay, and the last waypoint is a return to launch. Okay, so when it gets to waypoint 8, it's going to trigger return home, and Solo's going to land. So it's a pretty neat feature, but you just have to be, mindful of, the fact that that's going to occur if you select yes. Otherwise, you can certainly fly solo in a more manual way and take off automatically, or take off manually rather. And same thing for landing. You could return home, or you can have fly manual or something mapped to one of your A or your B button, and land a copter that way. Okay. All right. So finally, let's talk about the parameter, the failsafe parameter that I was mentioning earlier. To get to that, you want to go to your flight data screen. Actually, you want to go to your parameters listing here in the main menu. Okay? And to see all the parameters that are currently set on solo, you want to click the little cloud here in the top right hand area with the down arrow button. So it's a cloud with a little down arrow. And this will download the parameters that are on your solo. Okay, and there's a search box here. And the parameter that we're interested in is called FS underscore THR underscore enable. Flight safe throttle enable. Or fail safe throttle enable. Okay. Now you can see the value here is set to 2. And 2 means enabled, continue with mission, and auto mode. Okay, so what is auto mode? Auto mode is autonomous mode that we selected in the flight data screen to actually tell Solo to execute the mission. Auto mode is autonomous mode. Okay, so this failsafe applies to autonomous mode. So you would make this a value of 2 if you wanted Solo to continue on irregardless of the controller signal. So if Solo loses its signal, it'll continue along and execute and fly to every waypoint until it reaches the end. Now you want to be extra careful with this and make sure, if you're going to do any sort of manual intervention with Solo, let's say you wanted to land it manually, you didn't have a return to launch or a land waypoint explicitly set in your mission, right? You want to make sure that the last waypoint is somewhere near your home location. So wherever you took off from, you want to make sure that Solo is going to be at least visible in the sky for you to have controller signal to issue a return to land from your controller, or to bring it down manually using the flight stick. Okay, so if you're going to use this parameter, you have to make sure that it's not, that the waypoint isn't somewhere off in the distance, that the last waypoint is somewhere close to you, to where you're going to actually have, line of sight to Solo. Okay, so you have to be careful about that. To not worry about this, you can just select number 1, which is always enabled, which it'll always return to land. Okay, so if this is set to 1 and you lose controller signal, Solo will just return home. It won't continue with the mission, and it'll just come home and land. All right, that's I believe that's the default, and you can confirm that by looking at your parameters and confirming that it's set to 1. But for our purposes, I could leave it on 2 because that's what I prefer if I'm going to fly a mission that is outside of my line of sight. And the third value for this parameter is enabled always land. So if it loses controller signal, it's going to land right at that spot, which is not, 99% of the time, not what you want to do. I suppose there could be a scenario where you would choose to do that, but just be aware that these are the 4 different options. 0 is disabled. 1 is enabled, always return home. 2 is enabled, continue with the mission in auto mode upon signal loss. And 3 is enabled, always land. Okay, so this is the parameter you're going to need to change and set to 2 if you want Solo to continue on its merry way. So once you set this to 2, you click the cloud button with the up arrow in it, and that'll upload it to Solo. I can't really tell if it did it because my keyboard is in the way here. Let's see. I'm sure it did it. I guess we can confirm. I'll change it to 3. Then I'll upload it. Okay, it said 1 parameter uploaded. And then I'm going to download my parameters, and let's see what the value is. Okay, and the value is 3, so it does work. So the up arrow is to upload. The down arrow with the little cloud is to download or read all the parameters from Solo. And the other button is, I think that's to open files. And the save icon is to save this parameter list locally here on your Android device. Okay? It might be a good idea to have that. Maybe make a backup of your parameters and save them in case you needed to refer back and read what a parameter was. And you can always transfer that file to a PC or open it on the Android device itself. It's a text file and it'll show the values. It's human readable, so not a big deal there. Okay, so that's the advanced parameter to take care of the return home behavior on Solo, and that's the way you would do it. So anyway, I think that's going to be it for this video. I decided that I'll make a different video for the map box and the offline mapping information. There's actually some documentation now online that'll tell you how to do that. It's pretty straightforward. So, like I said, I'll create a different video. And if you guys have any questions on the topics I covered today, please feel free to leave a comment. And if I mess something up that kind of goes against what you know to be true, just let me know as well. I believe everything that I've done and shown you is correct, and I've tested multiple times. And I'll leave you with this. Don't be afraid to experiment. I know it's a $1,500 device that we're playing with. It took me a while to come up with the courage to actually test Tower, but that was because I hadn't run into anybody that actually used the failsafe parameter, and then somebody on the forums was nice enough to change that parameter to 2 and confirm that it does work. So once somebody's tested it already and confirmed that, then it made me a little less uneasy. So I began to do some more experiments with Tower, and I've had great success with using it. And the main thing is, as long as you're mindful of how you set up your mission, which mission you've uploaded to the drone, your takeoff and your landing behavior, as long as those things are solid, from an understanding perspective, there's no reason to fear this technology. It actually works. It works all the time. Most important thing is flying where you have absolutely great satellite coverage, where your HDOP value is something like 1.5 or 1.7. Anything less than 2.0, will assure that Solo behaves and returns home, pretty much right on the same spot it took off from. And, Solo will always do that if you press the button on your controller for it to return home. So, always know that option's available. And, that's about it. So leave me a comment, and if you have any other questions, I could address them directly. And if there's any changes I need to make, please let me know. But rest assured that everything I've talked about has been tested personally. And, I wish I could have shown you a little bit more with regard to the actual screen when I have Solo connected to GPS, because some options do change. some of the icons change on the bottom of the screen, but for the most part, that's the sequence you want to follow when putting Solo into autonomous mode. So thanks for watching, and like this video if you liked it, and drop me a comment if you have any further questions.